Hi, everyone, and welcome to the live recording of the Creative Confidence Podcast, where we talk with creative leaders about innovation, leadership, and growth. It's our first live recording of 2026, and we are so excited to have so many of you here with us today. I'm your host, Mina Seetharaman. I'm the head of new ventures at IDEO and of the team here at IDEO U as well. And I'm delighted, as always, to be here with this terrific community. I see some of you are already doing it. Those of you who are regulars to the live recording, a very snowy Toronto. We love to start by having you drop your name and location into the chat. So if you haven't done it already, please do so. I love the representation from Canada. There's some folks from snowy Toronto, from BC. I see there's people from Bend, Oregon, folks from India. I'm always amazed at the folks who join us from inconvenient time zones for this time of day, like that you give us your time. We're so grateful for it. I'm coming to you from just north of New York City in my home office in the Hudson Valley. And our speakers are coming to us. I think Michelle is coming to us from our San Francisco studio. And Cas is also coming to us. She's coming to us from New York, right? From Brooklyn. So totally,
yes, Brooklyn.
yeah. No, it's good. I think we're well represented. But I always enjoy. There's someone from London. There's someone from Atlanta. Someone from San Salvador. I've been to Lucerne, Switzerland. I really love this. I could do a whole podcast where I just talk about places I've been based on what you all put into the chat. So today, as I mentioned, I am joined by Cas Holman and Michelle Lee, two amazing play experts. So excited about this. And I will give you a full intro to both of them shortly. Welcome both of you to the show.
Hello.
Thanks.
So today our topic is play. It is often dismissed as something kind of frivolous at work or something that only kids do. But we are going to talk today about how play can be a serious advantage, a mindset that helps leaders ask better questions, navigate uncertainty, and unlock better work. Just to give you a little bit of the lay of the land, we're going to start with a short interactive warm-up, and then we'll explore some big ideas together with our experts. And then, as always, we will take your questions at the end. We'll try to take as many of them as possible. So make sure to be dropping those questions into the chat as we go. And if you enjoy these live recordings, make sure to sign up for the IDEOU newsletter where we announce the upcoming schedule. We have some great guests planned for 2026, and I would really hate for you to miss them. So let's get started with some intros. First, Cas Holman. Cas is the founder and chief designer of the toy company Heroes Will Rise, love that name, and a former professor of industrial design at RISD. For those of you who are not from here, RISD is the Rhode Island School of Design. She's done workshops and seminars with teams at Google, Nike, Lego Foundation, Disney Imagineering, and art museums around the world on playful learning, the design process, and the value of play in all aspects of life. Some of Cas's designs include toys like Rigamajig and Gmo, as well as play experiences at the Highline in New York and the Liberty Science Center. Cas is also the author of Playful, How Play Shifts Our Thinking, Inspires Connection, and Sparks Creativity. I know some of you actually often notice the books that are behind me on my bookshelf, and you will actually notice that Cas's book is here replete with stick notes. And I highly recommend it. It's actually a terrific read. And some of you may notice or recognize Cas rather from the hit Netflix show Abstract, where Cas's work and personal journey were showcased. We'll probably talk about that actually in a little bit. So welcome, Cas.
Thank you so much.
I know I think this is going to be so fun. We don't do a lot of episodes with two experts. And so I'm really excited to do this one because I know that you and Michelle have appeared together before. And many of you will recognize Michelle because she, of course, has been a former guest on the podcast. She is an IDEO partner and executive co-managing director of our San Francisco studio, which is also home to IDEO's Play Lab. Her background is extensive, spanning toy design, user research, product management, and design leadership. And she's got a great focus on applying playful thinking inside complex, outcome-driven organizations. And some of you may also recognize her as the instructor from IDEOU's Creative Thinking for Complex Problem-Solving course. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. So excited to be here. So excited to be here with Cas, especially. This is going to be so much fun.
So I want to take your classes, Michelle.
Oh, yeah, please.
We can totally arrange for that to happen.
Happy to have special office hours too. Yeah, super fun. And glad to be here with you. Always love being here with Champions of Play.
Mhm.
I think this is going to be a great episode because while you both share a lot of belief in play, you approach it from different angles. Cass, you design play itself. And Michelle, you apply this kind of playful thinking inside some of the biggest organizations in the world around really hard kind of business problems. That contrast, I think, is what will make this really interesting for many of our viewers today. So I'm really looking forward to it. But let's actually start with a warm up. And Cass, I think this is one of your favorite exercises. You do it a lot with students and executives. So I'd love for you to talk about it for a moment.
Yeah, this one we called name by function. And this actually came out of one of the first classes I ever taught in industrial design. And I found that my students were a little bit stuck in archetypes. So they kind of wanted to design shoes and cars. And I wanted them to think outside of the shoes and cars. Because what is a car but a way of getting from here to there, right? Do we need to design another car, or maybe we could, design any other mode of transport, right? Or way of getting places. So this kind of came out of that, and I've used it since, and I have to say it actually is kind of how I think in general. And so yeah, I think it's a really great exemplary of playful thinking in general, and kind of creativity way of thinking outside of the archetype.
Excellent. Okay, so the way this will work, everyone, is I'm going to share a prompt. And we, meaning myself, Michelle, and Cass, will also sort of respond to the prompt, but we would love all of you to also respond to the prompt in the chat so that we can see how you're thinking about this prompt as well. And that prompt is design a way to measure time. You'll see that there's a little image of it up on the screen. Design a way to measure time. Um, so looking at this, I'll kick off because I have a ridiculous way I measure time right now. It changes. But right now I measure my getting ready time in the morning with Taylor Swift's album, The Life of a Showgirl. I would bet that it is about 41 minutes long. So if I get in the shower at like 7 in the morning, I know that I'll be done by 7:40. And so I don't even look at the clock, but I know if like by song number 4, I'm still lollygagging around in the shower, I have waited, I'm going to be late. And so
That's
that's how I'm
amazing.
measuring time right now.
That's fabulous.
How about you
I
all? How do you measure time?
I think my primary measure is my stomach. I'll even when I'm just in like a beautiful creative flow of something, and immersed in a project, um, I'll notice that time has passed based on how hungry I am, or my stomach growling, and it gets more aggressive throughout the day.
My gosh, those are such good answers. I'm loving also seeing what's coming through on the
I
chat. And
know,
I'm
it's
so
good.
curious. People who are like, same, like, is it the exact same Taylor Swift song? Like, is there something about that song? Um, I am going to think about time, I think, on a larger scale, because one of the ways that I really look at time is seeing pictures with my children and how much they've grown over time. And I was like, wow, I thought that was just yesterday. And that they're like babies in that picture. And now they're teenagers. That must have actually been a really long time ago. So that's one of the ways that I really ground myself in when did this happen? What period of life was this?
Yeah, it's
Um,
interesting to think about kind of, are we, is time in front of us, or is time behind us, right? Is it something that we're moving into or moving away from? Is it like accumulated, or is it like something that's yeah, ahead of us? I actually forgot that this was the exercise we were doing, and I just happened to be reading a book by a physicist in an effort to understand time. I don't know. I have a feeling this is a theme with creative people, that we have an odd, if not rather tenuous relationship to time. But this book is really interesting. The Order of Time by Carlo Rovelli, and he's a physicist. So I don't know if it's gonna help me understand or change my relationship to time, but it's interesting to kind of just like undo the measurement of it completely by trying to change how we look at what we perceive to be the problem or the thing we're designing.
Love that. And I think especially like our topic is play. Like play
Hmm.
totally messes with time, right? Like we think about
Yeah.
flow and you'll be doing something. It's like, oh, it's just been a few minutes. And you realize a couple hours have passed by, but it was so fun that the time literally flew by.
I'm finding it's really interesting to see the things that are happening in the chat, as you mentioned, Michelle. Like people talk about, someone mentioned, I have questions, basset hound time. I'm assuming it's like when their dog is hungry or when their dog wants a walk, or the sun moving around the room. Someone mentioned their need for coffee. Someone mentioned US presidents. Like that time scale, I
Mhm.
thought the difference in the time scale of our answers was interesting. And I was wondering if when you ask a question that is less about form, like we could have asked this question, like design a clock, right? And that would
Mhm.
have given us, to your point, or design a shoe or design a car, would have given us very different answers. Um, what what is the difference that you find happens in the way people respond or the way they think when you ask them about a function as opposed to a form?
I think it actually removes it. Often it removes it from what we assume is designed. I think we don't think about time as, or the measurement of time as something that's designed. We think that it's a given. But in
Right.
fact, like not just clocks, of course, are designed, or the devices that we use to track it. But like the system of time measurement is a thing we designed, and it is somewhat arbitrary and kind of pretty silly if you think about it, that we divided it into 12 60, but it's measured by 12, but half is 30, but it's within 24, and it's a three. Like it's so strange. It's kind of so it is. I think it helps people realize and kind of look at what is designed and kind of take a step back and say, oh, things don't actually have to be the way that they are, right? Like
Right.
like this doesn't, with the case of cars, like do we need to drive? Do we need to make cars more streamlined, or could we maybe make something else altogether? And so sometimes it takes zooming all the way out and kind of saying like, wait, what is the fun? Even a really good example of this is like the my again, this was kind of in the time that name by function was um, being when I was developing it as a project or kind of an activity or a play sprint. I think of it as a play sprint because it's just like a short little way of shaking your thinking. Um, all the students had to-go mugs. They had fancy, it was 2008, and so everyone's, we were trying to not use paper cups anymore. But what was funny was I kind of thought like, do we need more of these to-go mugs? Do we need to keep designing these, or do we just need to sleep? Like, do you need a nap? Do we actually need that? Like, maybe we could, what about drinking fountains, right? So it's again, you kind of take a step back. Like, is it about this thing, this object, this artifact we're designing, or is there actually something else? And like, typically, it relates to a human need of some kind. And I think
Right.
sometimes in design, we can get kind of far away from like, what actually is the underlying human need of this thing or this problem we're solving, and is it actually a problem?
Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
totally agree. I think what you're describing, Cass, is just like the blessing and the curse of being a designer. Is like you
Yeah.
can't look at anything at face value anymore. You're just like, oh my gosh, could it be something else? Like, why does F be that way? What is the problem this is actually solving? I just came back from CES, so that was very much the case of like, why is this here? Why do we have another robot for this? Does it have to be a robot? And I do think that when you start with form, it's really restricting, right? Like if we were to say design a clock or a watch, you immediately be like, well, how big is the watch face? How many numbers? What shape is it? Whereas if you go back to the function, it just opens up so many more possibilities. It gets you into that like curiosity state of asking questions. And as you said, Cass, it gets us back to like, what do humans actually need? It gets us into the experience that we're creating and the problems that we're solving. So yeah, I think that's really key to how do you design things that people actually want and need and respond to.
Mhm.
That was a perfect segue into the next area I wanted to explore, which is this notion, Cassie, you've sort of talked about that one of the biggest lessons from play is that it's learning how to ask better questions. And so
Mm.
why do you feel, I mean, I feel like it's sort of obvious from the discussion we're having, but why is the question just as important as the answer?
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. it's kind of, I think, why I tend to spend a lot of time on a design brief.
Yeah.
Um, because the framing of, again, is it a problem? Is it a question? Are you following curiosity? Is there room to to follow it in places that you're not expecting? Or, do we want a linear sort of framing? So, um, yeah, I think that in the question can either kind of open up curiosity or it can limit it in a way. And questions can be open-ended, varying degrees of open-ended, and contain all kinds of leading details and words. I think I play a lot with language, obviously with the name my function exercise, because it shapes how we understand. And so even in brainstorms, kind of shifting the driving question or shifting the prompt can lead to completely different outcomes. And I even calling them answers is tricky because, like the idea that a question has an answer means that there's like one outcome, right? Or one thing rather than, and even, a question rather than a curiosity. And so there's all kinds of ways that like with just tiny shifts in language, we can kind of open up the question, which opens up our thinking. And it's a great way to get unstuck if you're in ideation. It's also, like Michelle said, it's a great way to like almost become immobilized by the fact that, that today's solution is tomorrow's problem. Right? So we wind up kind of like chasing our own tails with trying to fix things. So I think that's another nice thing about like being mindful of the question is are we solving something that's either not solvable or not important to solve because there's in the meantime, there's something bigger looming above that we could be designing for.
Yeah, I was wondering, Michelle, we sometimes talk about this a little bit, like the unintended consequences of our actions or designs. Like you think you've designed this great thing, and then actually what you may have designed is a new set of problems you've not quite anticipated or explored yet. And it's not malicious. It just sort of happens sometimes. But I was wondering, when you're meeting with clients at IDEO, like how does this notion of the better question or you like leveraging questions show up in the work that we do with them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to touch on something that Cass said, which
Sure.
I just love that you backed up and said, well, questions are not created the same, that some are limiting and some are more expansive. And
Yeah.
I think especially if you follow IDOU, you hear us saying, how might we quite a bit. And we really love using that question form factor because I mean, the alternative is like, can we? Which, of course, an answer is no, we can't. You shut it down immediately. But how might we? I mean, for anyone who hasn't dove deep into that, those three words are chosen so carefully because how assumes there is a way, right? It's just like it is. We get past can and we just say yes, we can do it, and just now how do we do it? Might means that there's not just one answer, there's multiple answers out there, which really sets us up well for brainstorms and for exploration. And then we is great because it's not just about you doing it or me doing it for you. It's something we're going to do together. So those three words are so key to so many of the questions and how we pose our opportunity areas to our clients. Um, and I actually had an interesting situation where at one point in my career, we decided to think about could we use our design process to spin out a company and do that instead of just responding to client asks. And I actually realized how hard it is to come up with a brief to start with. Like, what is the brief that's going to get you really excited, that will prompt new directions to go? And so that's how important the question is. And I think, I mean, one of my favorite projects at IDEO is a Willow breast pump. And if you were to say, like, we want you to design a breast pump, like you probably get something really close to what we've had for many, many years. But if you actually open up into a question of like, how might we design a better way for mothers to provide breast milk for their babies when they can't turn to breastfeeding as an option? And in that situation, you immediately start wondering, well, what do moms want? And I'm pretty sure you get to like, they don't want a loud, clunky device that they have to tether themselves to for so much time out of the day and remove themselves from what they're already doing. And the solution goes to a very different place when you ask that question and go straight to the solution is a breast pump. And there's breast pump components to it, but it looks nothing like the breast pump we've had before. And that's how you really like leapfrog to innovative ideas versus just incrementally changing things little by little.
Yeah, the other question that we ask a lot at IDEO, just as you were bringing up the how might me, is what would have to be true? Because you're right, like sometimes people will try and shut down an idea because it just feels hard. And oftentimes the best ideas are hard, right? Because we're trying to solve hard problems. And they'll say, well, that would never work here. I mean, how many times as designers or as folks at agencies or creative thinkers have we heard that? And so that what would have to be true, right? And then it allows them to open. We're not saying we're going to do it. What would have to be true for this to work here? And then it opens up a whole new set of ways of being a little more divergent in the thinking again, and opens up more opportunity. I just think that idea of like being playful in the questions, being playful in the responses, it sort of opens up that space. I love the idea of focusing on those questions a lot. It sort of sets up this idea that play is kind of a mindset. And Cass, you've talked about play being a mindset, not a mandate. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about what you mean by the play mandate, and that's the wrong idea, and what happens when leaders try to mandate play.
Yeah, I don't think play mandate would have come to me. It was a question from a CEO of a large corporation in a talk I was giving. And someone asked, okay, so just tell us, what does the play mandate look like? And I was kind of like, oh gosh, okay, wait, let me back up a little bit. Because it's not the play has to come from the top. If first of all, if the people if adults don't feel safe, much like children, they can't play. They can't be brave in their thinking. They can't take risks if they don't feel safe in their environment. And if they're, the environment being in this case the workplace, and feel safe typically looks like, will you be laughed at? Will you be, will your chances of promotion be thrown out the window if you throw out crazy ideas? Are you expected to follow the norm, or is innovation kind of encouraged from the top, from all directions, and from the top meaning that leaders have to model playfulness and model bravery and in their thinking, which looks like having ideas that may not work and being able to talk about them openly and talk about why they do or don't work. And I kind of think of it as that if a leader, and I practice this also as a professor, I know that it's quite different, but I like to throw out really bad, by throw out, I mean like give the group in brainstorms and ideation. I'll volunteer an idea that's bad, and so that it becomes the group's idea to then kind of contribute to and shift and change to make it into a viable idea or an interesting
Right.
idea. And so it also takes the onus off of one person. Like ideas don't belong to any individual, right? Like they came from somewhere. They were inspired by something and many other things and people. We propose them to a group, and then they become the idea of the group to take somewhere else, right? And that's play. So the idea that we play with ideas, and the practice of, we don't shoot down ideas. Whatever idea is pitched into the brainstorm or into the room becomes everyone's to kind of take and craft, and then say, okay, this is one thing. Now let's take another direction. Now let somebody else throw something out that we'll all contribute to and hack and develop and shift and change, and back to kind of how might me, or even what if. I just love what if. What if it's, and that could be, what if it's green? And it could be, what if it's a song, right? So it
Right.
could be related to form. It can be related to what if it happens Tuesday, right? So any number of elements we're describing with, and or sorry, that we're designing with. Um, so that's one way that I think that the play mandate isn't something that needs to be like, and now we play. Um, because that's just not how play works. And that's not going to make people feel safe. I think that that would make it another thing people are afraid of being bad at.
Right. Yeah, Michelle, you've often said we can't do okay, it's 4 o'clock, everybody play now. Like it just
Yeah.
doesn't work. You've talked a little bit about like thinking about the motivations for play and how to sort of really seed it into the culture, much as Cass is talking about. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, forced fun really doesn't work. No one likes forced fun. I don't like forced fun. I try not to get distracted by the chat, but there's so much great conversation
I
here.
know,
And I'm
it's
seeing people talk
crazy. I
about like
know.
someone tried to mandate at work. It totally fell flat. It didn't work. And that's true, right? You can't make people play. Like you can't force someone to play. It goes against everything that play is. And Cass mentioned safety. Like I think that's number one on the list. Like
Mhm.
we can't make someone play. We can set the conditions to invite someone to play. And someone used the word invite here as well, which I really like using that with the word play.
Mhm.
And um, when we think about safety, it is about like, how do you create a space where people can feel vulnerable? That's another word I saw come through in the chat. Vulnerability is huge, and having leaders be able to model vulnerability is a big thing. Um, Cass, something that I remember you mentioning when we were at one of your book launch events that I thought was just fascinating and threw my whole safety thinking into a loop was that sometimes you think that the people who feel safest are the ones who fit in with the group.
Mm.
Um, and then I think you remind me that actually, like if you look at some of people who have typically been marginalized in the past, they're the ones who play the most, right? And
Mhm.
um, I think you can see that in like just how fun like gay pride parades are, like where it's like so much play and action. And also you talk about like play as a form of protest, and you wrote a whole article about that. And um, sometimes you feel safe when you actually aren't part of the core group,
Mhm.
because when you're the core group you are so interested in preserving your space in that core group that you
Yeah.
don't want to break any of the norms. But if you're already ostracized from that, then you can go all out. So I actually like think like when you think about safety, like what are the nuances of that? It might sometimes be different than what you expect.
Mhm.
I know I started playing more because I started off my career as an engineer, and I realized I was one of just a few females in a room full of men, and there was nothing I could do to ever fit in. So it gave me more permission to be myself and do what made me happy. And so I think safety is interesting. So just mentioning that, but how do you create spaces for safety? How to leaders model that safety? How do you even do very deliberate things? My friend Pia at Lego, had a conversation with her, and she mentioned how at the start of her workshops, she actually hands people M&Ms, and I can't remember, might have been like a green M&M is what makes you um, get younger, so that you can adopt the mindset of a child. And when you leave, she gives you a different color M&M to restore you back to your age. But she's deliberately created this space where she's saying you can come here, and in this space, you can think differently. You can come up with wild ideas. You can challenge the assumptions of the organization. So I think that's intriguing. My other two ingredients for play, so safety being number one, but two being agency, because again, you can't force people. People have to willingly want to play and come into it. Um, and I think one way you can do that is through joy. Like, how do you actually make it something that people enjoy doing? And I think joy is what also keeps you coming back for more. It's what perpetuates the play. And this is also where I think when people say, let's gamify it, they have it wrong if gamifying it means that you want to get to the end to get the reward. Like, if you're truly gamifying something, people don't want the game to end. You want it to keep going. So yeah, like creating those conditions and meeting people where they are. So some people are ready to jump in and karaoke in front of a room. Other people, you need to ease them in. So we'll do things like creative warm-ups, which might be a simple imagination exercise, a simple sketching exercise, whatever it takes to like slowly lower the barriers and get people to the point that they do feel safe enough to be vulnerable, to take chances, to experiment and try new things.
Yeah, I think those are such excellent examples. Um, and there's an interesting question that came up around, I don't have positive associations with play from my childhood. How can I embrace that as an adult? And I think that one of the things that I'm sort of hearing as I hear the two of you talk is that play isn't about replicating stuff from childhood exactly. It's not about, I played this game as a child, so I'm going to play it as an adult at work. It's about figuring out places where people feel safe or to be exploratory and curious and maybe push the bounds of things in a way that they didn't expect might be possible, right? Like, I think that they thought maybe wouldn't be appreciated, or in some cultures maybe even would be punitive in a way. Like, we're not suggesting that it's like, oh, you played Monopoly as a kid, we're going to play Monopoly now as a team, and that's our play thing. Because I think that we have to figure out as leaders what feels playful and joyful in the interests of helping people feel like they can do better work. At least that's what I'm hearing from both of you.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point that I talk about in the book. I propose paying attention to when you feel yourself kind of being like shutting down play. That I think we all have, of course, like many different lots of input happening in our psyches, but I call it an adult voice and a play voice. And so it's probably your adult voice that's telling you that's a terrible idea. Don't propose that in this brainstorm. Like, that's not, nobody's going to want to do that. Don't say that out loud. Or save that one for later, or make it better before you tell anybody, right? So I think that's an adult voice that might come from, any number of places. I think most of us hear quite a bit of that as we come up through grade school, and we're taught that there is typically one right answer, right? I propose that as adults, we tune into the play voice. So there's also a voice that tells you, that comes up with that crazy idea and wants you to share it with the group and wants you to, kind of hang out in the sunny spot on the grass, even though nobody else is sitting there. And it is like the ways that we play as an adult. I think that honestly, I don't think that we know very like collectively, and in the research that I did for the book, which was quite a bit, and I collaborated with a science writer, Lydia Dinworth, who's an incredible science journalist. We found a lot of play. There's so much research on play, it in the broad sense and for children, but there actually is not very much specific to adults. And we know that, of course, there are huge benefits in creativity and whatnot, but like I don't think that we know very much about what adult play looks like. And as individuals, most people that I talk to in the course of my career as adults who have said to me, help us play. What about adults? When I talk to them about like, okay, yeah, what's your play? They kind of don't know. They know that they need it. They know they want it. They want their work to benefit from it. But most adults feel a little disconnected from what their adult play is. Um, so I think that it it's important that we're able to kind of discover that and kind of, again, like Michelle said, like meet ourselves where we are rather than expecting ourselves to play like we did when we were 5 and then kind of feeling like play failures because we don't have fun, playing with blocks anymore. Or maybe we play with our 10-year-olds and think like, well, this is, I'm doing it because I love my kid, but this is kind of boring. I also hear people judge themselves very harshly for that in a way where I kind of like to remind them, like, that's not your play. It's okay.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
developmentally in a totally different place as a 40-year-old than that 10-year-old is. Like, you're going to play differently. So, yeah, I think that being aware of your play voice and your adult voice and starting to listen to your play voice and thank your adult voice, but ask it to kindly, like, maybe, shut up for a day. Or maybe like, okay, thank you. You're trying to protect me. You perceive this to be, again, back to feeling safe. Like the adult voice is like, it's not safe to say this potentially bad idea out loud in a meeting. But your play voice is like, this is interesting and unlike anything anybody has said. You should say this, right? So being aware of those two factors and maybe listening to your play voice.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And it actually is kind of leads me to the next thing I wanted to talk about. So I do have a question very directly related to the book cast, but I first want to ask a question for our audience. You don't have to put anything into the chat. I just want you to contemplate it. And that question for the audience is, when was the last time you played? Just think about that. And in your book cast, you outline the 8 play types. So I was wondering if you could tell us about them and why understanding these types is helpful in a work context. And I think you covered a little bit of that territory, but I think that seeing those types and hearing about those types would be helpful.
Yeah, in working with children and designing for children, there are a few different kind of taxonomies of play. I use one that was developed by play workers who are professionals who work in adventure and junk playgrounds, mostly in the UK, but we're increasingly having more and more here in the US, which is fantastic. And there's a lot in the book about play workers. But in the 20 something years that I'd been designing for play, I used theirs for everybody. I kind of thought of it as like these are taxonomies of play as it is. And as I was writing the book and starting to apply those more directly to helping adults, okay, here's a how-to for you. I realized that we needed our own play types. That what's risky play for a child is not risky play for an adult. Like for a child, risky play is jumping off of something tall or any play that might get out of the sight of their family. If you're having a picnic at the beach, for the child to go 20 feet away is kind of a bold move, right? But that's not risky for an adult. What's risky for an adult is acting silly in public, which is what every 5-year-old is doing all the time, right? So I realized that we needed a whole different taxonomy of play for adults. So we kind of we spent some time. I talked to a lot of people. I threw a lot. Like I said, I like to kind of just put things into the world and say, "What about this?" and and so these are some loose categories, and within these, all of them can be social play because social is such a huge element in play, and all of them can be free play, meaning kind of open-ended play versus something that has predetermined outcomes and right and wrong answers and possibly instructions. So, should I describe these briefly?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I'll give examples of each. So slow play or meditative play, I think like bird watching is a really great one. I practice meditative play and slow play on the subway just by people watching instead of looking at my phone. So it's attention. It's kind of it's similar to attention play, but it's anything where you can kind of get lost. I think that for adults, yoga can even be play in certain ways. It's something that they're doing to connect with their mind and body, and often, it can be done in a way that's either free play, kind of moving around, or instructive. So creative play is similar. That one is pretty similar to how creative play for children. So anything where you're generating something. I think a lot of adult play is consumptive. And by that, I mean someone else designed something and we kind of take it and say, okay, entertain me, right? Like that's where the play is kind of designed and we kind of say like, okay, yes, now. So in creative play, you're generating it. It's tapping into something inside of you and you're bringing yourself into it. Problem solving play is kind of tinkering. Maybe that's reorganizing the living room. Maybe it's hacking something in your garage or in your studio, workshop, model shop. Attention play is kind of either daydreaming or like I said, also bird watching is kind of attention play. But being mindful and intentional with your attention, I think is particularly hard these days. And I call it play because it is in fact like making us more present in the space that we are. And it does typically involve curiosity. And if it doesn't start with a curiosity, it leads to curiosity because there's so much, the worlds we live in are quite rich. And I think we forget that when we try to escape into other digital worlds. Possibility play is kind of anything that's exploring what might be. So I was recently talking to somebody who loves Pinterest boards, and she's already married, but she still has a wedding Pinterest board. I said, "Are you going to get remarried?" She was like, "No, it's just really fun." So that's kind of possibility play. Competitive play is what it sounds. So that's kind of sports. Whether or not you're playing a sport that's designed by somebody else, maybe you're making it up as you go, or maybe you kind of just make a contest out of something else, race you to the corner, competitive play.
Right.
Embodied play is anything that where you're using your body, moving around. And misbehavior play is interesting because since the book came out, and as I'm talking to people more, I think that almost all adult play, any public adult play is misbehavior play. So behaving in a way that's not expected or that might be a risk. It's also, I think that misbehavior play is where we find and push our own boundaries. And maybe we're doing that with partners, maybe we're doing that alone, maybe we're playing dress up, so I think that misbehavior play or just kind of behavior play is ways that adults get to find and push or step out of who we typically are. And, whether it's kind of performative or related to our identities, we can kind of embody new ways of being and existing in the world.
I love these, and I like the range of them because it does sort of speak to the notion of like play isn't sort of that you and Michelle are talking about. Play isn't sort of restricted to one. We have such a narrow view of it, and it's actually not very narrow at all. So with that in mind, I mean, our audience is kind of interesting. It was amazing how recently and how broadly they all play. But with that in mind, with those 8 types in mind, I'm going to ask the question again. When was the last time you played? And did that expanded vocabulary around play maybe change how you might have answered that question? I imagine that you might be playing more often than you realize potentially. I'm going to shift a little bit from just purely talking about play to this notion of friction and play. Friction is a topic we talk about all the time at IDEOM. I see Michelle nodding her head. She's given talks on friction. It comes up on the podcast all the time. And Cas, in your book, you talk about friction as an essential part of play. Like, how do you think about it in that way?
Yeah, I think originally I would call it a challenge. And in designing for children, often the assumption is that it shouldn't be challenging. But in fact, the challenge is where the learning happens. And that's also what keeps them, engaging with something if it is an object. If it's too easy, they'll do it once and then it's done with it forever. Whereas if it contains complexity and there's all kinds of, so yeah, I think that we're not doing ourselves any favors by making everything so easy that it doesn't ask anything of us. So I think, and that's how, in the broadest sense, how I think about friction or challenges, that's where the good stuff is. I have a saying or kind of a slogan for my products that easy is boring.
Oh, I don't know, Mina. Did you go on mute?
Sorry, my microphone just cut out. Can you hear me now?
Now you're back. Now you're back.
All right, great. Excellent. Michelle, one question that comes up a lot. So friction is actually a topic that our audience has often found a little challenging to understand in practice. And you talk about it all the time. I would love for you to sort of talk a bit about examples of bringing healthy friction into like client projects and work in practice at IDEO or other places.
Yeah, no, I love this topic, and it's probably what I've been speaking about the most recently, because I think it's so important, especially right now as everyone's talking about generative AI. And wow, generative AI promises so much about saving time and energy and just making everything super efficient. And play actually does the opposite and has lots of benefits in doing the opposite. I do like that you said healthy friction, because I'm not saying make everything harder. There are certain times I'm like, I just need to get out of the house. I just need to get this done. So don't put friction everywhere. So I think I've been saying a little bit like purposeful friction. Where do we want to make sure we aren't erasing the friction, where we might actually even add it back in? And I think one of the often referred to examples in the world of play is the game of golf, because if you think about the game of golf, the whole purpose is to put that ball in the hole. And so if you're trying to make it as fast as easy as possible, you just walk up to the hole and drop that ball in the hole, like, and you're done. But if that was the game, I don't think it would have the legions of fans or the people who go do this on a regular basis, call it their favorite hobby.
Yeah.
I mean, the game is
show ever.
yeah, exactly. I was like, I'm not tuning into that. But the fun comes in, let's make these people stand really far away from that hole, make the hole super small, give them a long stick, maybe multiple sticks to choose from, and then make them hit that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, let's also throw in some like sand traps and water traps just for extra kicks. But all of that makes it activity that's rewarding, that's meaningful, that gives us time to just relax and be out there with friends. So it's also social means of connecting. So I think that shows that play and introducing friction can actually bring us so much in terms of that meaning, that connection, the satisfaction, the joy. And I would be really sad to see a world that erases all of that in service of just getting things done faster and easier. So I think that's important. I think in the design process, the way we think about it is if we were trying to get somewhere really quickly, that's a process of converging. It's like, let's just get to the answer and then design it as fast as we can. But the way we look at the design process at IDEO is really a series and a mix of diverging and converging. And the diverging is so important. Diverging is what kids are really good at. So adults are just like, tell me the task and I'll get it done. Kids, anyone who's a parent knows that kids don't necessarily take the straightest path, often get distracted and wander in different directions, ask lots of questions. But kids also often come to interesting solutions and take things in directions that are unexpected. My son at one point asked me, which came first, orange the color or orange the fruit? And I was like, wow, I never thought about that. And if anyone's curious, the fruit actually came first, which I would have thought maybe the other way around. So that's your little bit of trivia for today. But in design, those diverging moments get us to more interesting solutions. We do have to convert at some point. We have to make decisions. We have to decide what we're going to make and make it real. But diverging is what gives us more possibilities to choose from. It's what gets us to something that's different and more interesting. It happens all throughout the process. So early on, it's what gets us to ask more questions, to be curious, to challenge assumptions, to bring in new perspectives, to seek inspiration from places that are unexpected. It's also comes in when we brainstorm. Like, you don't want to just come up with one idea, come up with many ideas and try to have some of those be super ridiculous, because really thin line between ridiculous and brilliant. So how do we really open up those possibilities? And even when we're prototyping, prototype to learn, not just to make that final thing. And all those things introduce friction. I mean, I think when we do that, sometimes our clients, especially newer ones, might have a little bit of a heart attack because they're like, we only have like 4 more weeks. When are we going to get to the thing? What's the thing? And it's like, well, I could tell you, but it probably wouldn't be as interesting if we went with what I thought now versus if you gave us a little bit of time to explore, to literally play around with this problem. And then I think we'll get you somewhere more interesting if we do that. So that's another example where just friction, taking time to sit in that unknown and the ambiguity a little bit longer, can pay off in the long run.
I have so many more questions, and I'm looking at the time, and we are going to do another Q&A episode as well, but there are so many questions in the chat that I actually want to jump to do a few Q&A questions now from the audience, if that's okay. The big question that's in here is actually one that 2 folks have brought up, and then a whole bunch of people seconded. And it was, I think it was Joey and Chris, and I'm trying to find it in the list that I have. And it was about ROI. And it jumped out at me because, frankly, I know Joey. And so when I saw his name in the chat, I was like, hey, how's it going, man? But it was the question was, play is not always the fastest route to get to. It might get you to a better answer. It may not necessarily be the fastest route. And in a kind of corporate world where we're obsessed with kind of return on investment and getting to answers quickly, like, how do we encourage leadership and kind of balance those two things, just because they seem at odds with one another, or at least seem to create some tension or friction there. How do we address those two things to be able to leverage play and yet still kind of deliver on those business goals?
Cass, you have an amazing story on this
I
one.
mean, yeah, I think that again, like many things, it kind of requires rethinking, right? Like I think we can force if there's a system that's not innovative, I think trying to force an innovative process into a not innovative system is you're always going to run up against things that aren't going to work or fit. Um, so, I mean, there probably is some way that we could kind of use the same metrics to measure what is the ROI and say like, okay, you're going to find other solutions quicker, but you would have to have 5 rounds of that process in order to wind up with, the same. It might take longer to have a playful process. However, where you're going to get the innovation that comes of that, like whatever patentable ideas or whatever kind of new products that wouldn't happen otherwise, would still take you 5 more rounds of this other process. So it's kind of, again, it's like if you have to force something that doesn't fit into that measurement into the measurement, you try to do that without changing what it is that makes it innovative or what makes it work. In terms of like how much more creative and how much more innovative the outcomes will ultimately be. So I thankfully haven't found myself in a place where I have to actually like use the same standards of measurement. In my own company, it's just built into how we do everything. So I think we measure based on that's how much time it takes, right? So for us, in when we're developing a new product, the time frame for ideation is much longer, and then from there, development is shorter. So, it does probably in the end wind up being a longer process, but we have an outcome that we wouldn't have gotten to otherwise. So that's kind of, it is in my mind, a more valuable outcome. So the return on the investment is bigger than it would be if we had invested less, but we would have gotten something less, right? So I think we just had to shift our what would be a typical like I don't think a template for a design process would work in my studio because our ideation is twice as long as most studios spend in the idea phase. But then we need a lot less development because we're more clear on like what we're doing and why.
Yeah. I thought also, Cass, the thing that I was thinking of that you mentioned during that book event was that we just need to be careful that people don't use play specifically to achieve ROI. I think you mentioned how you can't have people come into the room and it's like, okay, now everybody, we're going to play because we have come out of this with 5 patents. Right. And that doesn't work because again, it's like forced play. It doesn't just give people that room to explore. But I do think people have tried to figure out how to measure the ROI of play in the past. I mean, the thing that immediately comes to mind is Peter Skillman, who was at IDEO quite a while ago. He used to do these activities at our workshops. That was this give people a bunch of spaghetti and marshmallow and some tape, and you have to build the tallest tower possible. And he ran this with different groups of people. And he found that those who had the hardest time were, I think, they're business school students or executives, but really high performing adults. The people who had the highest towers at the end of the time limit were actually kindergartners. And the reason for that was because the business students and the professionals spent a lot of time talking about it and trying to strategize in their heads. The kids were the ones who actually started building. They took the spaghetti. They tried to see like, oh, what happens? Oh, it starts to bend. Oh, that marshmallow is really heavy. Oh, how brittle is the spaghetti? And I think that's interesting, right? Because like when people have run tests like that, you get interesting results that show like it's not what you would expect. It's not the people that you think might came out on top, and play actually had a role in how those kids succeeded, the method they used to get to a solution. So I think there's been moments like that. I think also just tying play to some of the ROI, some of the KPIs that are already out there, like retention's a big deal, right? And I think right now, if you can introduce play into your workplace, it changes the mindset. It makes people excited to come to work on a regular basis. Like that's going to help your retention, which is going to ultimately help your bottom line.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. Like we think about ROI in very contained units, but actually there are other investments like human capital investments. I hate the term human capital, but that idea of investments, that they're a broader set that we could be thinking of. I think that's a really good example. I have one more question from the audience. It's a little bit more personal, but I think it's a really good one. Somebody who remained anonymous said, would Cas and Michelle be able to share how they have implemented playfulness in their lives?
Yeah, I think it's like in my being. So it's not a thing I implement. I will though say the last few months have been very rough. The last couple weeks in particular, like the news is rough. Like the world is hard to pay attention to. And I think that the it's counterintuitive that when things get rough, play is even more important. But when things get rough, play is even more important. It's like that's and my partner and I have to remind ourselves of that. And my partner is trans, and so there's all kinds of things, just as Americans, we're all terrified. And then there are people who, have questionable visa situations who are extra terrified, and people who are, so we all have whatever reason to not play, or we might think like, oh God, things are bleak, or like, I'm going through a rough patch, or like the news is terrible. Like play is like often the last thing that we think to do. But in fact, like this is really when we need it. So we make a point of, I go on a swing. I like to like things that are a big for me, big kind of adrenaline moments. So swinging is great. We have a trampoline. In between meetings, I jump on a tiny trampoline. If you can get to, I like roller coasters. And side note, I work with this group in Colombia that's called Confama, which they have public parks. They kind of design and run the public parks among some other things there, and they have doctors who they're testing this out to some extent, but they're prescribing play. So they have patients who they prescribe go on this roller coaster. In these public parks, they have like a drop zone and a few different small roller coasters, as well as, a lake and picnics and barbecues and these beautiful public parks. But so these doctors are prescribing drop zone to people who are having different, physiological issues and even heart things. So instead of medicine, you can play, right? So this is just to say, I do have to remind myself on occasion to go and do some simple things. Typically, they're things that like bring me back into my body, because that's all kind of separate into my brain.
Right.
Which is, that can not help with anxiety, for example. So, yeah, I'm driven to play, and even as somebody who's like steeped in it, as Michelle is, right? We're like play is both our work and our probably modus operandus, and yet it's still on occasion like I need a reminder, and if I kind of make myself do it, and whether it's go for a walk, or I mentioned things like bird watching, or find a swing, go on a swing, or jump on it does have a huge impact, and you do kind of feel more human again, like reconnect to being human.
Yeah, I love that. I think Cas, your little trampoline is my guitar, which I picked up during the pandemic. So I like to play for audiences of one. But it's that thing that I can pick up even like between meetings just to de-stress for a little bit. or when I'm processing something really complex. Often those breakthroughs come when I just let my mind wander a little bit and just strumming a song. I think the other thing that I do just about every day walking into work, I have this game I play with my daughter where I'll walk around and just look for shapes in the world. So it might be like the weird like ink spot or some like random piece of litter on the ground or just looking up at the clouds. And then I'll take a picture and draw over it and send it to my daughter and she'll like send me pictures that she sees too. And that just reminds me to find wonder in the world, that and to look at the world in a slightly different way. And I think it gives me some perspective of, so much around me, and I just need to pay attention. And there's so much possibility if I give it a chance. So I think those are some little things. And then definitely, of course, I think even to the work that I do and the career I chose, and something that allows me to be really curious and creative and to experiment on a regular basis.
Thank you both for that. That was excellent. Just a quick wrapper. I want to remind everybody that, play is a mindset, not a mandate. It's a way of being that we can set the conditions for as leaders, but it's not a thing that we can force people to do. It helps us to ask better questions, to get to better ideas and responses. It allows us to stay curious under pressure, to see the potential as well as the risks in ideas that we are exploring. I would love to invite all of you to subscribe to the Creative Confidence podcast and share it with somebody who needs a little creative inspiration. We'd love to be that for them. Check out the IDOU course, Creative Thinking for Complex Problem Solving. You'll get more of Michelle as an instructor there, and tap into the power of imagination to tackle complex problems. You can learn more at idou.com. Head over to LinkedIn after this to share some of your favorite takeaways and builds from today's conversation and connect with each other. Watch for the recap of this conversation follow-up episode, and absolutely remember that Cas's book Playful is on bookshelves now. It's available everywhere, and don't just take my word for it. It is, although I think it is excellent. Folks in the chat who've already read it, we're talking it up as well, so definitely worth your time. So thank you, Cas and Michelle, for joining me today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. This was really fun.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
I'm looking forward to our follow-up episode. And thank you all to our audience for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you next time on Creative Confidence.